2026 will forever be remembered as the year Eala did not just win tennis matches. She sparked a full-blown revolution for Filipino Americans across the globe. Picture the scene right now. The stadium is vibrating from the concrete floors to the upper rafters. Thousands of fans are waving the sun and stars of the Philippine flag in absolute unison. The noise is completely deafening. She hits a blistering forehand down the line, the ball clips the exact corner of the baseline, and the entire crowd erupts like it is a wild home game in the heart of Manila. It is pure, unadulterated electricity. You can feel the intense pride radiating from every single spectator. But just a short time ago, the tennis world was quietly whispering a very different, much darker story. The veteran critics said the brutal burden of a nation was simply too heavy for her young shoulders to carry. They looked at the grinding, unforgiving reality of the main professional tour and openly wondered if she had already hit her absolute physical and tactical ceiling. It is one thing to be a teenage sensation winning junior trophies and dominating younger peers. It is an entirely different monster to survive the absolute meat grinder of professional tennis. When 115 million people expect you to dominate every single time you step onto the court, the pressure is suffocating. It dictates how you sleep at night. It controls how you breathe during crucial breakpoints when the score is tied and your legs are burning. So how did a girl from Quezon City carrying that crushing weight completely rewrite the rules of the sport when everyone thought her journey was permanently stalling? The answer is not just about hitting a better serve or running a faster sprint. The real story involves a total deconstruction of her identity as an athlete. We need to go back to the very beginning to understand the sheer magnitude of what she just pulled off on the world stage. Long before the deafening standing ovations and the viral highlight reels of 2026, there was just a teenager with a lethal left-handed swing and an entire country scrutinizing her every single move, leaving the comfort of home to train with the best players in the world. In Spain was not just a calculated career move. It was a monumental, terrifying leap of faith. Imagine being exactly that young, away from your family, and knowing that your success or failure does not just belong to you alone. It belongs to your local community, your extended relatives, and your entire country watching eagerly from thousands of miles away. Every time she posted a short practice video or entered a minor tournament, the comments flooded the internet. The immense national pride was beautiful to witness, but the underlying expectation was quietly terrifying. She had the elite, obsessive work ethic. She had the raw, explosive talent that coaches dream about. People saw those early flashes of brilliant shot-making and immediately crowned her the next big global superstar. They expected her to just walk onto the professional courts and sweep away the competition. But the transition to the unforgiving professional circuit was about to introduce a brutal and sobering reality check. The veteran women on the other side of the net do not care at all about your glowing junior resume. They hit the heavy yellow ball significantly harder. They anticipate your cross-court movement much faster. They ruthlessly exploit every single millimeter of weakness in your defensive game plan. Alex quickly found out that pure athletic talent does not protect you from the physical and mental exhaustion of playing seasoned veterans. These are grown women fighting for their mortgages, their ranking points, and their livelihoods week after brutal week. The gap between being a great junior champion and becoming a consistent daily threat on the main tour is a massive, silent graveyard of broken tennis dreams. Countless highly gifted players get completely stuck in that dark transitional gap. They travel completely alone to obscure tournaments and empty arenas. They lose in early qualifying rounds, quietly pack their bags in silent locker rooms, and deeply question why they sacrifice so much of their youth for a sport that gives so little back on most days. Alex was staring right into that terrifying abyss. She was regularly playing grueling, sweat-soaked matches that stretched well past the 2-hour mark and tested her absolute physical limits. She was pushing her legs and her lungs until they screamed for sweet relief. The expectation from her loyal fans back home remained relentless and completely unforgiving. Every unforced error into the net was intensely dissected by armchair experts. Every minor tournament exit felt like a devastating national tragedy instead of a normal part of sports development. You have to seriously ask yourself how long a human being can carry that specific, kind of intense psychological pressure before they finally snap under the weight. It takes a very rare type of mental armor to wake up. The bleak morning after a crushing 3-set defeat and willingly walk back onto the empty practice court to meticulously fix the mechanics of a failing backhand. Building this level of emotional resilience and tactical mastery is exactly what we study closely right here. If you want to truly understand the hidden psychology and the deep tactical evolution behind these historic tennis comebacks, you should stick around and join our community. She had the absolute, unwavering backing of a proud nation, but the daily reality on the hard court was becoming dangerously clear. The early childhood hype was fading fast and a terrifying new truth was rapidly taking its place. There was a dark stretch where the magic seemed to fade. The losses were not just simple defeats on a scoreboard. They were heavy, grueling battles that ended with her walking off the court, head bowed, wondering if breaking into the elite tier was physically impossible. You have to visualize the brutal reality of the lower tier professional circuit to fully grasp her absolute despair during this period. We only see the glorious finals on television, but we completely miss the agonizing qualifiers held in empty, freezing arenas across the world. Alex was grinding through these desolate venues week after week. The sheer physical toll of traveling across time zones, living out of worn suitcases, and waking up in unfamiliar hotel rooms begins to slowly poison your mental clarity. She was carrying the heavy flag of the Philippines in a sport traditionally dominated by European and American powerhouses. It is an incredibly isolating experience to look around the locker room and realize you are the only player from your entire region facing this specific type of pressure. There is no established blueprint for a Southeast Asian player to conquer the modern power era of women professional tennis. She had to build that complex blueprint entirely from scratch while the whole world watched her stumble. The lowest point came during a brutal stretch of tournaments where every single match felt like pushing a massive boulder up a steep, muddy hill. She was repeatedly drawing incredibly tough opponents in the opening rounds and struggling to find any consistent rhythm. Picture a specific agonizing third set during a rainy afternoon in a meaningless preliminary tournament. The stadium is practically empty. You can hear the heavy, rhythmic thud of the tennis ball echoing against the cold concrete walls. You can literally hear the squeak of her sneakers and the exhausted, ragged breath escaping her lungs after every single brutal rally. She was up a break, perfectly positioned to finally close out the match and secure a desperately needed victory. But then the heavy, suffocating pressure slowly crept back in. Her footwork became slightly sluggish. Her massive left-handed forehand, usually her most lethal weapon, suddenly became tight and horribly unpredictable. The opponent noticed the hesitation and immediately pounced like a predator sensing a wounded animal. The rallies grew longer, more punishing, and infinitely more agonizing. Every time Alex stretched for a wide backhand, you could almost feel the burning lactic acid building up in her heavy legs. The opponent ripped a final cross-court winner right past her outstretched racket. The match was over. Imagine the crushing silence in her mind right at that exact moment. She walked slowly to the net, shook hands, packed her heavy bags, and walked back into the dark tunnels of the stadium. It was the absolute lowest emotional valley of her young life. She sat alone in the locker room, stared blankly at the floor, and seriously questioned if her childhood dream was just an impossible illusion. The mental fatigue was far worse than the physical pain. Trapped in the shadows of these heartbreaking early exits, Eala was forced to make a choice that would either quietly end her promising career or ignite a global revolution. Every legend has a turning point, a single defining match where the switch permanently flips. For Alex, that moment did not just boost her ranking, it fundamentally rewired her DNA as a killer on the court. It happened early in the 2026 season against an opponent who represented everything Alex had previously struggled against. This opponent was a towering, heavy-hitting veteran, firmly entrenched in the top tier of the world rankings. The veteran stepped onto the court with the clear intention of completely bullying the younger player. The first few games played out exactly as the cynical veteran critics had coldly predicted. Alex was pushed far behind the baseline, desperately retrieving heavy balls, completely trapped in a helpless defensive posture. It looked like another inevitable soul-crushing defeat was unfolding in real time, but something incredibly profound shifted deep inside her mind during the first changeover. You could physically see the transformation in her body language as she sat on the bench breathing heavily. She stopped looking down at her shoes. She looked straight ahead with a cold, terrifying clarity. When she walked back onto the court, she made a massive, almost reckless tactical decision that changed the entire trajectory of her career. She stopped retreating. Instead of giving up valuable court space, she aggressively stepped inside the baseline. She decided to take the heavy ball incredibly early on the rise, completely cutting off the angles and stealing away all the reaction time from her shocked opponent. It was an absolute masterclass in taking control of your own destiny. Have you ever witnessed a professional athlete completely rewrite their entire tactical identity right in the middle of a high-stakes match? It is one of the most incredibly rare and fascinating things to see in professional sports. I am really curious if you noticed this specific shift in her court positioning during that iconic match, or if you have a different theory about what sparked her sudden aggression. Let me know your exact thoughts down in the comments because this specific tactical evolution is arguably the most brilliant strategic move of the entire tennis season. Once she stepped inside that baseline, the entire dynamic of the match violently inverted. The towering veteran suddenly looked slow, confused, and completely overwhelmed by the relentless, suffocating pressure. Alex was no longer the desperate prey. She was the absolute apex predator on the court. The energy in the stadium instantly completely transformed. The small pocket of Filipino American fans in the corner of the arena realized what was happening, and their cheers began to echo louder and louder with every single explosive forehand winner. We are talking about a spectacular barrage of aggressive shot-making. She was ripping the ball down the line with pinpoint lethal accuracy. She was dictating the brutal pace of every single rally. The frustration on the face of the elite veteran was incredibly obvious. Alex was playing with a fiery, uncontainable energy that we had never truly seen from her before. It was not just about hitting the ball harder. It was about absolute, tactical dominance and a complete refusal to be pushed around ever again. The final match point was a perfect encapsulation of this brand new identity. She served out wide, pushed the opponent deep into the corner, and confidently stepped forward to drive a merciless volley straight into the open court. The stadium absolutely exploded in deafening applause. She dropped her racket, let out a massive, triumphant roar, and finally released years of pent-up frustration, doubt, and agonizing pressure. She had finally conquered the massive mental block that had held her back for so long. That single, defiant victory was not just a tournament progression. It was the spark that lit the fuse for the unstoppable 2026 explosion. What happened next was not just a winning streak. It was a hostile takeover of the WTA Tour. Suddenly, the player who used to hesitate on crucial breakpoints was dictating the brutal pace against Grand Slam champions. She was backed by the loudest and most passionately loyal crowd in the history of the sport. The early months of 2026 were an absolute blur of total domination. She did not just beat the top seeds, she completely dismantled their confidence. You have to understand how rare it is for a player to go from struggling in lonely qualifiers to steamrolling elite opponents in consecutive weeks. She was stacking victories like building blocks. Each win was more explosive and dominant than the last one. The media focused heavily on her newfound mental toughness, but they completely missed the secret technical weapon she had been carefully hiding. Let us look at the actual mechanics that the major sports networks like ESPN completely ignored. They were too busy talking about her mindset to notice the absolute brilliance of her footwork. If you look closely at her service game from late 2025 compared to her dominant run in 2026, you will notice a massive mechanical shift. She subtly changed the angle of her ball toss by just 3 degrees to the left. It sounds incredibly insignificant. It is not. That tiny adjustment combined with a newly unlocked and violent hip rotation, right at the point of contact, completely changed the physics of her serve. This generated an insane amount of extra topspin and perfectly disguised the direction of the heavy ball. Elite opponents were left completely frozen. They were constantly guessing wrong. They were lunging desperately at thin air while the ball kicked violently above their shoulders. Her massive left-handed backhand also transformed from a solid defensive shield into an absolute weapon of mass destruction. She was taking the ball ridiculously early. She ripped flat winners down the line with zero hesitation. But the absolute best part of this spectacular rise was the atmosphere inside the stadiums. Tennis is traditionally a very quiet and reserved sport. Spectators clap politely and sit in absolute silence during the long rallies. The Filipino American fans completely shattered that outdated country club tradition. They transformed every single quiet arena across the United States into a vibrant and deafening block party. It did not matter if she was playing a massive stadium in Miami or a smaller outer court at the US Open. The stands were an absolute sea of blue, red, and yellow. Entire families traveled across the country just to watch her warm up. They brought an intoxicating, relentless energy that visibly rattled the elite European opponents. Imagine being a seasoned veteran trying to serve for a crucial breakpoint while thousands of people are chanting, roaring, and vibrating with energy across the net. The psychological pressure completely flipped. The opponent felt the suffocating weight of the crowd. Alex was feeding off that incredible energy. She was drawing immense power from the noise instead of being crushed by the expectation. She finally figured out exactly how to turn the heavy burden of a proud nation into the ultimate competitive advantage. But make no mistake, this revolution is not just about backhand winners and WTA ranking points. It is about a fundamental shift in the very landscape of global sports. Eala is doing something much bigger than holding up silver trophies on a Sunday afternoon. She is entirely rewriting the narrative of what it means to be a Southeast Asian athlete on the brutal world stage. For decades, the tennis elite has been overwhelmingly European and American. Young kids growing up in Manila or Cebu rarely saw someone who looked like them dominating the central courts of the biggest tournaments in the world. The professional pathway always seemed completely blocked by a massive geographic and financial disadvantage. You either had to move to Florida or Spain before you turned 12, or you simply had no chance. Alex took that massive historical barrier and smashed it into a million pieces. She proved that a world-class generational talent can absolutely originate from the Philippines. She proved that you do not need to fit the traditional rigid mold of a tennis champion to completely take over the sport. When she steps onto the court today, she is not just swinging a racket for prize money. She is actively validating the wild, impossible dreams of thousands of young athletes who are watching her every single move. The cultural impact of her 2026 campaign is absolutely staggering to witness in real time. The Filipino American community did not just find a good tennis player, they found an undeniable hero. They found a fierce warrior who carries their shared cultural values of relentless hard work and unbreakable resilience into the most exclusive sporting arenas on the planet. They watched her get knocked down repeatedly. They felt her deep pain during those agonizing early round exits. They shared her silent frustration, and then they witnessed her rise up stronger and infinitely more lethal than anyone could have ever predicted. This is the true definition of a sporting revolution. It is not just about the individual win-loss records or the millions in prize money. It is about completely shifting the global perception of an entire demographic. She forced the traditional tennis establishment to finally pay attention and show proper respect. They can no longer look away. The elite pundits and the cynical critics who coldly doubted her mental strength are now completely silent. They are too busy analyzing her masterful court coverage and trying to figure out how on earth anyone is going to stop this unstoppable force. But the terrifying truth for the rest of the tour is that she is just getting started. The technical and tactical adjustments she made are now permanently ingrained in her muscle memory. The mental demons that haunted her early career have been entirely vanquished. She is playing with a level of pure, terrifying joy and absolute freedom that makes her the single most dangerous player in the draw. We have just witnessed the birth of a brand new era in women professional tennis. The struggling underdog has officially become the undisputed apex predator of the tour. The young girl who once carried the crushing heavy weight of a nation has somehow learned how to fly with it. If 2026 is the undisputed year of the tennis revolution, you have to ask yourself a very serious question. What does the empire actually look like in 2027? The momentum she has built is completely unprecedented, and the rest of the tour is scrambling blindly to find an answer. Subscribe to Tour Vantage because we are documenting every single technical step of this historic ride, and you absolutely do not want to miss the next chapter. I will see you on the next court.